My name is Robert. Are we recording it?
Okay, go.
My name is Robert Johnston. Because my grandfather was a bastard, but the Penningtons, I had a grandmother named Johnston. They were all like, well, I wouldn't say inbred, they just had this similar names. My real last name should be Pennington.
Bobby Load has been kind of in my life since I was a little girl, because he went to high school with my sister.
Feel kinda high, you feel kinda groovy. Don't worry, little girl, it's all just a movie.
I know that other bartenders here, they didn't know him, so he probably got kicked out a few times. There were times when there were people in the bar and Bobby would walk in and they would also kind of, look at me and be like, who's this guy? And I make sure that they knew. I was like, that guy right there, that's a local legend. Remember this. That's Bobby Load.
Every time I saw Bobby come through the door, he always made me smile and he made me laugh. And I still just always had to watch for that one fucking idiot that didn't know who Bobby was.
I saw Bobby Load for the first time at Churchill.
1, 2, 3, 4.
When he started going at it, like, I couldn't be late. I stayed and watched his whole set.
He wasn't Bobby Johnson. He was fucking Bobby Load.
Afterwards, people told me, oh, this Bobby Load, he's old now, and he's sick, and a couple months later, Bobby's dead. So.
How would I like to be remembered? I'm not sure if I want to be remembered.
Going down the slopes and on that fight forever. Better than waiting in traffic for a fucking hour. Be sent to checkpoints, support your local scene. I'd rather see it down in the sinkhole. You know what I mean? And you can all go back to the swamp that you came from. Support your local scene. You're a fucking moron.
We were the people in our neighborhood that our neighborhood didn't want there. We grew up in a good neighborhood. North and South Lake area of East Hollywood is, I'd say it's upper to middle. We had a house in a neighborhood, it was kind of falling apart, needed a new roof. We were in and out of money. My dad would have $25,000 on one month and have nothing the next. It was just like hit or miss.
Some 27,000 turf fans at Gulfstream Park, Florida for the $115,000 Florida Derby. Favorite in the field is Carry Back, this season's star. But many eyes are on Crozier, the hard luck colt. It's a big race in its own right, but this test for 3-year-olds may be...
My dad trained horses for 40 years. He was a rounder. He could deal you under the deck. He could actually deal you a full house, or he could deal you nothing. If you really played some cards with him, you'd probably end up losing. He'd go and buy and sell horses for different owners. He'd go up to Ocala and sell a horse to a rich guy, or he'd train horses for oil guys, or people that had just old money. It wasn't consistent, I'll say that. So when we raced BMX, we'd be wearing jeans and everybody else would be wearing leathers and they'd all be all decked out, but we'd still win.
Bobby would tell me that his father was a grifter. He spent a lot of time at the track and he didn't always come home every night. The bills would not get paid on time, and there was a lot of tension involved in living at Bobby's house at that point when they were kids. Their mom didn't always have the best way of handling that kind of stress and would sometimes take it out on the kids while Bobby's dad was away.
His mom would rip up any kind of music magazines, AC/DC magazines, any kind of comic books or any of that kind of stuff. None of that shit was allowed. That was all, tools of Satan. And the first time that I went to Bobby's house, Bobby was very clear with me on how it needed to go.
First thing she would ask him when you walked in the door, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? And you'd always have to say yes, whether you wanted to or not. Because if you didn't say that, it went into this long proselytizing speech, fire and brimstone, and she would make you take one of these, rolled up scrolls pretty much every time you went over. But my experience with her was she was awesome. She was very, very friendly, very motherly. I look forward to going over there whenever I got a chance.
There's one story that stands out. Bobby and his brother Jeff were young, and they had a dog. And the dog was an indoor-outdoor dog. He went outside, and the dog had fleas. I guess, that the dog had fleas because he would scratch all the time. But she didn't believe that the dog had fleas. She believed that the dog was possessed by the devil, and that it wasn't good for the family. Bob sent Jeff away to his room or to another part of the house or whatever, while Mom took the dog out to the backyard, with Bobby in plain view while she butchered the dog.
If she took her medication, she was cool. If she didn't, it was a little crazy. Bobby feared her in that way. Didn't really know what she was capable of when we were really young. And, there were times where we thought, my God, God's going to tell her to take us out. Let's lock the door. Let's put the chair against the door. It was kind of freaky like that, because somebody that's a manic depressive and schizophrenic, anything can happen. They call it bipolar now. Bobby and I looked out for each other because of my mom and the way that she was and the way that we were brought up. We had each other's back. We used to go to the mall, and that was the thing to do when we were kids. And Bobby, we'd get in fights, and it was just so common. You'd be walking through the mall, and kids would be like, let's go, out to the parking lot. Something would happen, and Bobby would never let me fight. He'd be like, I got this little brother.
Well, I was a little boy living in Knoxville. My parents made me live in Jackson.
I met Bobby when I was 16 or going on 17. One day I was there with my guitar. We were playing in the living room. And Jeff showed up with Bobby. And Bobby had a drum set. He drummed then. And they started setting up, and Bobby came up to me and said, "Oh, you play guitar? That's cool." I said, "Yeah, I do. My name's Matt. What's yours?" And he said, "It's Bobby." I realized when I met him that he stuttered really bad, though. And he had started drinking more or less to kind of, calm himself down, to where he could talk a little easier, When he wasn't at all, his stuttering was pretty bad. He said, "Do you know this song?" And I'm like, "Well, hum a few bars, this and that." And he would always sing it really well, never stutter through anything.
Him and Jeff started speaking about getting a band together, and I remember Bobby telling me that at one point Jeff had asked him, "Hey, why don't you meet me at the Button South," which was this big, giant, heavy metal kind of a club down in Hallandale Beach Boulevard right by I-95, and they were having kind of like a guitar solo contest or whatever. So Bobby gets a ride down there to see Jeff play in this guitar, all these heavy metal guys play guitar solos. And Bobby said that Jeff had won the whole thing, and he was just totally blown away that this punk rock guy could go into this heavy metal contest and win the whole thing.
Jeff's a brainiac. Classical music bites.
Bobby and Jeff were playing in a band called Insanity Assassins, and they were living right on South Beach. Bobby came up to me right away. He was like, "Hey man, I'm starting a new band." And I was like, "Oh, that's great for you, Bob." "No, but I'm singing. Jeff's playing guitar, and the drummer's you." Bob had the name already. Bobby was like, "The name is Load, and I just need a drummer and a bass player."
At the time, Fausto was playing in a band called Genetic Mistake, along with Tony. Eventually, Fausto and Tony would meet up with Bobby and Jeff, and that would be the birth of Load right there.
A lot of that early stuff, Tony. A lot of the slow stuff, the sludgy stuff, the heavy stuff is Tony. And I think that's because Tony spent a lot of time in Knoxville. And up there, they were exposed to different things. He had a great taste in music, and the heavy and the sludgy stuff, it was adopted by all of us, but it was started by Tony.
Tony actually, to me, always had a very interesting musical background, because most of us growing up down here, and I think it's indicative of any region that you grew up in, you have everyone's really exposed to a lot of the same music, especially here in South Florida, where bands would go on tour and it wasn't like an easy stop to play Miami or Fort Lauderdale. You actually had to travel down here. Tony came in with all this new music like Jesus Chrysler and a bunch of like crazy stuff. It's like, wow, I've never heard that before. And it was just because of, just growing up in a different region and coming here and, just bringing some of that musical influences with him. And I'm sure that that really influenced his bass playing as well, and all the songwriting that he contributed to Load.
I saw the Melvins, I guess, 88 and 89. No one in Miami ever heard of that shit. And Steel Bathtub, Killdozer, DC3, Mentors, of all people. They weren't carrying big crowds. And so they go to college towns like we did. And unfortunately, I got to see them. Did I want to change my music style from when I left Knoxville to Miami? I just heard Tad and the Melvins. Yes, I'm changing my music style right now. It was just something that was completely different. It was pre all that bullshit grunge and all that crap.
Next time I saw them again, they were playing at Christine Strong's house party. I remember her even saying that her parents were really mad because it seemed like they were such nice boys, and they talked very calm. And once they started playing, the place just blew up.
Good evening, Student Public Radio for South Florida. This is WLRN-FM, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Off the Beaten Path, coming to you every Monday night at midnight. Tonight, we might be going until 3 o'clock in the morning. We're going to find out around 2 a.m.
Bob Slade turned on all of South Florida to punk rock music through Off the Beaten Path. His show was the second longest punk rock radio show in the history of punk rock radio shows, second only to Rodney on the Rocks. He always promoted the punk rock shows. He gave away tickets to punk rock shows. He did actual promotions, putting on concerts and shit like that.
The radio station was 100,000 watts. We went from Key West to West Palm Beach with repeater stations, repeater transmitters. We had a potential of a big audience. So I'm doing a punk show, and we had people listening in the Keys all the way up to West Palm Beach. And of course, a lot of people in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. I did about 30 hours a week of work for the radio station, plus my radio show. So I supplemented that with publicity and booking at different clubs.
Bob Slade was pushing a show, Typo Negative, Biohazard, and The Exploited. During one of the breaks, when Bob Slade announced on Off the Beaten Path that Typo Negative had bailed out, Jeff called him up and said, "Hey man, I got a new band. Let us open up the show." And Bob was like, "All right." And that was it. And so then we're playing at the Junkyard, warming up for The Exploited and Biohazard.
There wasn't any band in South Florida that sounded like that, and I thought South Florida needed a band at that time that sounded kind of like that to be more contemporary with what the national scene was doing. The 90s, you know, there was big touch and go, Jesus Lizard, Sub Pop, Amphetamine Reptile kind of sound that I was playing on my radio show. And I thought if these guys could get into the studio, they could come up with, you know, material that sounded just as good as anybody else.
I was down in South Beach, Miami, at the Uncle Sam's record store down there, and the girl behind the counter was looking at my stuff, and she goes, "Hey, you would really like this local band. A friend of mine's in it, and they're really good. You should check them out." And I was like, "Well, what band is it?" And she gave me a flyer for their next show, and she also sold me the original Load cassette tape. And so I popped it in my van on the way home and cranked it up, and I fell in love with it instantly.
Hold it, shit. Hold it down. I'm talking. Okay, listen. I'm tired of so much shit around here that I have to unload on you today. Last cage. I say! You give me a cage! Everyone's so good!
When we got with Bob Slade, then it really started taking off. We were practicing every week. We recorded the Hellraiser sessions. We were getting a bit of a reputation.
There was an underage show and Load was playing. The club is packed and there's like 250 people inside a club that only fits 50. It was ridiculous, and there was like people body surfing and they were all young kids. So I'm checking them out, and the first thing I noticed, like, wow, the singer is such a fucking character. They got a really dirty, sleazy sound. The drummer hits the drum so hard. Bobby is like leaning over and he falls off stage, and people just pick him up and put him like, wow, is this guy drunk? And turns out he was drunk, and he was just so funny.
When we first started coming out, it was hard for people to see past Bobby.
Bobby was, you know, the perfect front man, and he was always out somewhere. Every night, drinking. He was like his own best promotion, you know?
Well, anyway, this is a movie. It's not a movie, it's a fucking movie!
I see him there all the time, and he'd always be having fun. And he'd say, "What are you doing later?" "I got a 6-pack of Old Milwaukee hidden in the bushes outside." Because he'd get free drinks inside, but he always had his backup.
I first discovered Load. I think I met Bobby outside of, it's possibly Squeeze, and he was flying. Like, he just had this like really innocence about him. It was charismatic innocence. He wasn't like one of those people that are flying that was like pushing it into your face. He was like genuine about like, come see my band. I really want people to see my band. I think a year later we started to play shows, and we ended up playing with them.
Okay, Bobby, come up here. You need to sing for this one. Come on up. We'll sing together.
I say we change the name of the song to Big Brown Nasty Hermans.
That's good. I like that.
The name of Tesco E and Bon Scott.
All right. Just scream, Bobby. I know they can do that. That's cool. Let me have some of your beer. All right. Yeah! Just say fuck when I hear you.
Big Brown! Nasty Hermans! Big motherfucking...
The thing about Load is they were truly raging, alcohol-fueled, totally punk rock on stage. But I think that they, out of all of the bands in South Florida, had a respect for us, because they knew that we weren't just like picking up our instruments for the first time. We practiced our asses off, and we could play. And I think that they didn't really see us as women, they just saw us as other musicians, and it was refreshing. That's why we really got along with them so well.
This is backstage at the Load show, at the Squeeze. I'm gonna chill over here with Bobby for a little while. I gotta get some footage, guys.
A lot of shows back then, you'd have rock and roll people there, you'd have fucking metalheads, you'd have fucking punk rock guys. We had a lot of skinheads back then, you know, they've all gotten older now. Bob had a great thing about that skinny little bastard be up there, and if he saw somebody hit somebody too hard, you know, he would, "That's it, man, leave him alone, don't touch him," blah, blah. You know, he had good control of the fucking crowd, which is awesome, especially coming out a skinny little guy out there, a drunk old dude. People listen to him, you know?
Bobby definitely, you know, he kept my attention just because he was Bobby, rolling around the stage, you know, hollering, yelling, just the whole thing. And you know, when I first saw Load, I liked the band. Thought they were a good band. The next time they came back, I think they just put out Pastor's Day, and they just blew my mind. They're amazing. That record's still my favorite record. It's really hard to nail their sound down. I mean, you had elements of sludge and grunge and punk and hardcore and like rap noise. It just, nobody sounded like them. And every time I saw them, they had new material every time. Every time. That's another thing that was great about them. It seemed like they never stopped. They were touring all the time, and they were consistently putting out records.
There was a commonality between like bands that they really like Tad or like, you know, Tony love the Melvins, and that you can kind of hear that, but there was still something of their own that was really hard to kind of pinpoint. And they just rode the rail between playing like, you know, aggressively fast to like slow as sludge, you know, so you can never kind of really pin them down. But I think they always kind of knew who they were without being pretentious about it, because they definitely weren't pretentious at all. You know, maybe even to a fault, a little lack of pretension. But they had just had this strong identity.
Is it in fact true that you are actually having surgery on the air, gentlemen? Was that surgery over the record there?
Cutting out my appendix right now.
Man, that was you said
a pocket knife.
That was from your release right before the new one. What's it called?
Yeah, it was called Pastor's Day. That's probably our best reviewed single.
The first Pastor's Day pressing, we sent that out to all the clubs in the southern United States, and the southern clubs reacted well to the record. Load was able to get 20 shows just on their second single, and it just kept getting better and better.
Okay, there's the ritual. We run tour. You wake up wherever you are, get in the van, you know, crush your eyes out, probably do a wake and bake, whatever. And of course, Bob had to get six-pack going.
We were slated to play with Nail at this show in Birmingham at a club. But what we didn't know was that night was supposed to be the final conflict between the Skins and the Punks. This was the showdown. Now, we didn't know anything about it. Everybody in town knew about it, and the club knew about it, so the club said, hey, how about this? Fuck your show and fuck your guys from Miami. Not having that shit here, right? So they had the show in a fucking house. We get into town and we catch wind of this, right? Dumb ass, stupid ass fucking Bobby Load. We're getting ready to play, and there's some skinhead activity starting to go outside. So what does this retard do? he fucking goes and he sticks his head through the fucking window with the microphone to his fucking mouth, and he goes, "Hey Hitler, hi Hitler." And we start fucking playing, people slam this and this and the other, and there's this little fucking skinhead, and he pushes this guy, and he pushes right into Bobby. What dumb luck. My cymbal catches Bobby right here. And it hits him right on the bone. Not enough to knock him out, but enough to make all this blood. And I see that. And I stop. Hey, it's time to get the fuck out of here. And Jeff looks at me and he says, okay. And show's over, right? And now there's a lot more fights.
Usually when you finish playing a song, you hear crickets or an applause. We heard fighting and grunts. That's how bad it was. You know, I had a good 150, 200 people going at it. About third or fourth song, the shit started getting in our space. We were more worried about our equipment at that point.
We're running with equipment in and out. Hot tubes, full cymbal stands, snare drum with a stand, everything is being thrown in the van. Everybody's crammed in, we're all out of whack. There's people fighting all around us. And the next morning, we see on the news, oh, violent punk rock skinheads, this and the other, whatever. And they arrested almost a dozen of the skins and confiscated 33 guns.
Bobby needed to be watched on tour and controlled because he would be very willing to drink at the beginning of the day and drink all day long. Fausto and Jeff kept telling me that they had to make sure he didn't drink until it was time to play. You know, once it was time to play, then no problem. You can go ahead and drink, Bobby.
What blew me away as Bobby's little brother is the crowd.
And there's this like revitalizing punk rock scene that's like coming back into the United States. You know, it's happening in New York, it's happening in LA, it's happening in Miami, it's happening in Nashville, Tennessee. All this stuff is blown up and grunge is you know, tie a plaid fucking shirt around your waist.
Roll the dice! Roll the dice!
You know, there were a lot of good bands in the scene at the time. We were good. There was a lot of talented people. But a lot of the bands, even ourselves, it was a little bit contrived. I mean, I'm not saying we were posers, you know, but it was still a little contrived. We were trying to do something. We had a vision that we were trying to achieve, whatever artistic vision it was. With them, it was just pure real. It was just like, they might as well just been at a band practice when they're on stage.
I was so proud, man. That's my bro, man. You know, it's Bobby. It got to a point where I couldn't go out and see him because of his health, though, and I would get sad. I just couldn't, you know. I didn't want to go out there with him. I didn't want to be a part of that. And I know that everybody wasn't really hurting him, but in a way, it's kind of how I felt.
When I first saw Load, it was just a band, and Bobby Load. I remember he had, you know, almost Kurt Cobain-ish long hair, and I remember him seeming lucid. But the legend of Bobby Load that was when I think it became synonymous with alcoholism. And you know, being, I don't want to say he was aggressive, because I all of my friends that I know that really knew him said he was a real sweetheart of a guy. But, you know, the legend of Bobby Load was him getting on stage and being like, what is this guy gonna do next?
He had a very, I guess it was like an Iggy Pop reckless abandonment when he was on stage. I think he felt always much more comfortable in that zone, so he was always able to, just be himself. You know, just be himself and just be so comfortable and just in control of the situation. Maybe he didn't have a control in other areas of his life, but he always had control on stage, control of himself and control of everything that was going on around him.
Load here. Hey, right here, fresh off the press about 6 weeks ago, right here. Voodoo Highway Magazine, there it is. Nice, sir. You guys get to see this? Load?
No, I actually
Load.
haven't seen it yet.
Giving it to the crowds.
What do we give to the crowds?
Well, we can talk about that later because of
We
the
gave
crowd
it.
watching. It. That's right, the hypervertical. What? Well, at least get your names out. That. Bobby on vocals, on bass Tony, and guitar Jeff, and Fausto on drums.
There came a point where it was just me and Jeff that was doing a lot of the writing. Me and Jeff would teeter on the fence of either writing a fucking killer song or getting into a fist fight. And at any given time, I'm sure that some of the best Load songs never got recorded because it went the way that we were gonna, right there in the band room, get into a fist fight.
Let me tell you, some of the idiotic, stupid shit arguments I've ever heard came out of these two guys, man. The ending of the song, they had an argument between dun or dun. And beer bottles were fucking drunk.
That attitude always was present on stage. I looked at Jeff and he was tearing it up, and that made me want to beat through something, you know. I want to fucking chew through one of my cymbals. I'm not gonna let him outdo me. And if I was really on, he would bloody his fingers on the guitar.
I think any collaborative effort, you need some type of fire there. You need some type of antagonism going on back and forth. And I think Load caught into that energy. There was a show at the Ambassador in Deerfield Beach, and they got about 2 songs into it, and Fausto and Jeff got into a full-blown fist fight. Jeff was over the drum set, and Fausto was grabbing his guitar, and Bobby was trying to break it up. The whole set was over like in 3 songs.
At that time, he was the one that held everything together because he really was serious. He wanted to play better. He wanted to make himself better. He wanted to make the band better. And every show was really important to him. I don't think anybody else really gave a shit that much. Unless he made them give a shit, you know what I mean?
When Jeff would break bottles and do guitar solos with them, I would just get chills up my spine. It was nothing like that. The sounds that he made and the energy that he brought.
He was like the secret weapon in Load, I think, because everyone would focus on Bobby, obviously, but Jeff, I think, was really like the secret weapon, the other element that sort of put him over over the top.
The last tour I booked, the last tour was their 4th tour, the Southern Fried Southern Tour. That was the height of the band. They were wicked. You know, halfway through the tour, they could just crush anything in their path. We never got any response from any of these Northern or West Coast labels. We sent out records to everybody, and we never got so much as an acknowledgement that they received the records, or they never called us and said, hey, we're a little bit interested, you know, keep sending us stuff, or anything like that. It was like a blackout, you know, no black hole, you know. It's like sending Load records out, and they would never, you know, never make an impact for some reason.
Someone in there that Fausto from Load, Fausto and Cindy are here to see her. Tell her, I swear it's the truth. All you gotta do is tell them.
It's fine. Take us down to the driveway. Call Warner Brothers Records in New York.
I swear to you, this is the honest truth. Just tell her that.
That's wonderful. That's nothing to do with
I can write it down? Do you want me to write it down?
It's not going anywhere except in New York.
Can't you just deliver it to her?
New York?
No, not to her. She'll know. She'll know, I swear to you. I'll write it down on a piece of paper. I don't want to come in. I know how the whole thing.
No one's in residence right now.
No one's in residence.
I gotta be honest with you, man, we were paying the ass. Record labels didn't like us. We got to the level that, you know, next step would probably have to hook up with a more, I wouldn't say mainstream, but someone more well-known and tour with them, hopefully tour with them, something like that. That would have been the next step. We settled in our laurels in South Florida a little bit.
When they stopped touring, I remember going, why are you guys not touring? You know, you could see them spreading through the Southeast, going to Texas, you know, going Virginia, getting up, you know, the Midwest. They really started moving, and it never picked back up. It went back to Miami.
I'd been in Miami for a while, run into some people that I knew from Gainesville, and was like, oh, you guys check out this band that's about to play in a little while. And we were playing pool, and this chick's like, what the fuck? She was all pissed off about this dude who's curled up on the, like they had a Denny's booth next to the pool table, and this dude's curled up, sleeping in the fetal position with red parachute pants, fucked up cowboy boots, like with embroiders and maybe even some wings or something, and like a cut off muscle shirt, and it was cut off like here. She's like, what the fuck, who is this dude? He's in my seat. We can't even sit. Right at the same time that she's complaining about him, Bobby rolls over on his back, and he's like not waking up, but he just kind of rolled over, and his red parachute pants got like really dark red, and he just peed himself while he was sleeping while this chick was complaining about him. I was like, he's about to fucking blow your mind in a minute.
Like I said,
He'd be dead asleep on that fucking busted up, old dusty fucking pew looking couch, and he was asleep there, and I'd be like, Bob, what the fuck, dude? Come on, man. Get up, we're playing right now. And Jeff would be on there and he'd be like, Vrang.
Fausto was basically the babysitter, you know, and when you put it up there, you said Load were playing, everybody said, nah, they're not, there's no way they're playing, they're playing. And like I said, my experience to the first time, I've seen all the punk bands come through, Agnostic Front, all of them, whatever, and that's when you got a big crowd out. And when you had a local band play, you get a good, decent crowd, but when you put Load up there, forget about it.
Yeah, I need some beer up here.
of stress, I think, so at different, getting him to gigs.
Taking care of him, basically.
Taking care of him, yeah. And I did that for a long time. I made sure he got to the gigs. I made sure he was, not too drunk to play.
Right.
But he was also pretty impressive under the different conditions that he was able to perform.
Yeah.
Well, I got something for your pretty face. Turn around and take a taste. I'm the whisperer in your ear. Go right here and come back here. I got something for your brain. Twist you up, try to insane. Shake, bump, to your knees. Close to me and scratch and bleed. I tell you, girl, I got a hole in the
It was just ingrained in his fiber.
I was in a band, we played with Load at Churchill's, and somebody kept spitting on us. And I picked up the mic stand and I hit the guy that was spitting on us in the head with the round base of the mic stand. And then after the show, Jeff came over to me and was like, dude, you should play in our band. And I was super excited because I wanted to do that for a long time. And I came into a situation where it was like a combination of like your dream and a nightmare, so it was like this amazing fucking thing, but it was kind of at the point where it was starting to be held together with tape.
We figured it out one time, Jeff and I, and we figured that he drank about a case of beer a day. He was never into hard liquor. In a pinch, he would drink some hard liquor if it was around, if he couldn't get any beer, but basically he was a beer drinker. And he never thought initially that alcohol in the form of beer would be that detrimental to his health. I didn't know how bad it was until one time Bobby called me up and he said, hey, Lifeguard Jim, we got this really good gig up in Orlando and we need you to be a roadie. And I was stoked because at that point, Lloyd was my favorite band. They'd played at my house a bunch of times. I'd seen them play live in South Florida maybe 50 times. The show was awesome. After the show, everybody kind of grabbed some beer. We went back to the hotel room and it was about 3 in the morning and everybody else is getting ready for bed and everything. And I hear all this rustling around in the bathroom. And the door was kind of open, so I looked in to see what was going on. And it was Bobby basically packing beer in the sink and putting ice on top of it, so he had a cold beer when he woke up the next day. And that's not something that most people think about at 3 o'clock in the morning as they're getting ready for bed. And sure enough, the next day, the first thing he wakes up, he cracks a beer open. So it was like a non-stop thing. He was always drinking. That's kind of when it hit home for me that it wasn't just his, his stage persona or the character he was creating. It was actually, kind of a, dangerous situation he got himself in.
I think people wanted him as like the party favor, because he was just unhinged and explosive, and he'd always make you laugh. And he played that role to the hilt, but he would lament over a lot of things. Just the way culture was, and the way people treated each other. And I remember him being really dissatisfied with the state of comedy. And just like really lamenting over the fact that everything is sarcasm. There's no wit, there's nothing really intelligently funny. And that always stuck with me.
we all approached Bobby as a band, and I approached Bobby as my brother, and I said, man, I'm not telling you to sober up, but you got to pull back on the fucking reins a little bit. We're not 21 years old anymore. We need to pull back on the reins and make sure that we can do this and continue to do this in the way that we do this.
Bobby was not doing well, and Jeff always, whether or not he was doing well, he was hard read. He didn't really let you know how he was doing. He always seemed okay, whether he was or not. We realized what we wanted to get out of Load wasn't what was happening. Their plans hadn't worked out right. So Jeff, everybody, that was it. We had a last show. We did the whole thing, you know, like the last show and all of that stuff. And then I was off doing another band, and Fausto called me, and was like, oh, I got another band, and they had some kids singing. And at that point, it was me, Jeff, and Fausto playing, and Bobby would show up at the shows, and I always felt awkward. It was pretty much Load with a different singer.
In 2003, I tried to bring him into AA, and it didn't work. I quit drinking. That's the last time I had a drink. Everybody says, oh, you weren't an alcoholic, you weren't this. Probably not, but I just tried to get him to do it, and when I stopped, it made life easier for me. You know, went on doing, I built a business for myself, I got my contractor's license, I got a family, you know, I mean, this was, you know, way before kids that I quit. I tried to get him to see it my way in the respect that he needed to do things in moderation, but you know, Bobby just did what he wanted to do, and he'd say, these were Bobby's words, don't worry about me, little brother, I'll be fine.
We were actually playing before Bob was in the band, and I loved the hell out of Bob like a brother, but these guys wanted to get him in the band, and I just didn't think he could perform anymore after seeing the last couple of Load shows, and seeing how pissed off Jeff and everyone got because he couldn't get to the show. I kind of was being a pain in the ass about it, and I didn't want him to be in the band. But he came in saying fucking, you can't call it rock and roll. It's like, alright, that's it, he's in the band.
So you're gonna get rich quick, thinking on a diet. You're so depressed, anti-social unrest. You're so bullshit.
He was on or he was off, you know? Bob would be awesome one night, and the next night he had no idea. Like, we're playing? I don't even know. Like I told you guys earlier, like, we got done playing that show at the City Link, and right after we got done playing, he thought we were about to play. I'm like, Bob, get off stage, we just played. He was just so lost by that time.
When Load quit playing and then they started doing Middle Finger Mob, it was faster, like fast Load. There was none of the slower, sludgier rock and rolls, just balls to the wall, like more hardcore sounding. And he seemed like he was really happy doing that, you know, but still, you know, we couldn't be together or on the phone for more than a few minutes without talking about Load, you know. I think he had really high expectations for Load, so yeah, I think it bothered him.
He was a disaster to play with by that point. And we went up to a show for Danny in Jacksonville, for like a Rat Town guy. And Jeff was a fucking disaster, and he pawned his shit right before the show, and he showed up high as fuck, and then he was obnoxious the whole way in the car, and he borrowed like a miniature BC Rich from a friend for the show, and he couldn't even tune the guitar. I tuned it on stage while we were in the middle of songs. I was going over and trying to help him, and when we came back, we were fucking done. I don't think he played with anybody seriously ever again.
After Middle Finger Mob, Jeff did nothing. His brother died. And then, at that point, I thought he went into a downward spiral.
You know, I heard that, and this could be total hearsay, that he started dealing drugs and that, you know, made me shriek, you know, because that's never a good scene, especially down there. And, you know, just like, why? You know, like, why? Like, he has such better qualities than that. I think it's sad. You know, I always thought that, like, Jeff really had a lot of potential. He always seemed like the guy that could be the one to step out of his comfort zone and, you know, take shit over somewhere.
Bobby made it his home base for a long time, and, you know, Bobby being Bobby, everybody put up with him for a long time, you know. There was always someone to buy him, you know, buy him a beer, or I'd buy him a beer, or, you know, one of my employees would give him a beer, which means I was buying him a beer. And shit, man, he would go in the alley and find scrap wood and cardboard and freaking paint pictures on it, and then come out and try and freaking sell it out front to people for beer as a Bobby Load original.
He would sell his artwork for $20, you know, at various you know, clubs around town, at the Poorhouse, you know, at some of the other local watering holes. And his artwork, sometimes you would get a piece of art that was amazing. You could tell he put a lot into it, and a lot of the stuff was very insightful. It was actually very good artwork. And other times, you could tell that he just grabbed a piece of cardboard that he found on the ground, used some pens and a marker, and was just basically trying to make some beer money, you know. So if you were a Bobby Load art collector, it was kind of like hit or miss depending on what the situation was, or the inspiration of whatever art he was putting together.
So he'd be like, hey, you want to buy a paint? And it'd be done on a piece of cardboard, quick drawing to get $10, whatever. So I'd buy the painting, here, Bobby, oh, thanks, bro. And then at the end of the night, give him back the painting so he could go and resell it, whatever. It was just my way of, I would give Bobby money, but it was my way, instead of giving him money, it was like, I'm buying your painting.
Unlike all my other friends and my bandmates, I don't stay home and smoke weed. I try and go out and hustle. Alright, what realization has helped you the most that you would like to share with others? Don't take any shit from anybody.
Every open mic night that he could find, he'd ask me for rides to open mic nights. He just wanted to be out there and singing. He'd get mad at his band members or people that he used to be in bands with. You know, you guys are going to sit on your ass and smoke pot all day. I'm going to go out and sing, you know, and he meant it.
For 7 years, I lived one street over from Bobby Johnston here in Hollywood. I knew it, but he didn't. I would be riding around and I'd see him on a skateboard or on his bicycle or on, on foot, walking around with a backpack. I'd say to myself, oh, there's Bobby Johnston. That's good to see he's alive and kicking and well, because I had heard a few years back that, you know, he was having really bad liver problems. They told him to quit drinking altogether, or his liver was going to give out. And I said I'd see him walking, you know, I'd be like, oh, I guess he's doing okay, doing stuff. At the end of 2006 or the beginning of 2007, me and my fiance broke up. And being new and single, I had, you know, different girl roommates or girlfriends at my house. And I was driving with one named Kim down the street one day, going to the little store, and I pointed him out to her. I said, hey, there's my friend Bobby Johnston. You know, I see him walking around here all the time. She's like, he's your friend? And I said, yeah. And she goes, pick him up. Why aren't you picking him up? And I was like, this is Bobby Johnston, you know, you don't know what you're asking for. And she said, is he your friend? And I said, yes. She said, well, you better pick him up. So I turned around and said, Bobby. It was like, oh, hey, Matt, I'm going to Ricky's. This guy owes me a picture. I'm like, cool, man. Well, this is Kim, and we're going to the store. You want to ride? And he said, yeah. And he opened the back door, and I just got this ML55 AMG Mercedes, and he proceeded to spill a beer all over the back seat of it. And I was like, see, honey, this is Bobby. And she went, oh my goodness. And she goes, you know what? I forgot my billfold, you know? And I said, well, the house is right around the corner. I said, all right, we'll go back. And I went back, she ran in, and Bobby said, this is where you live? And I said, yeah, Bobby. And from then on, I saw him every day. And he would do those open mic nights in all downtown Hollywood. And I would go with him, and I'd play different stuff with him and things like that.
Songs about teenage love.
There used to be an open mic night at a bar up the street called Octopus. It's just a few steps away. He would go there to play open mic, and then after that, or kind of in between, he'd come in here to say hi.
The whole wide world, the wide world of sports, and I don't even like sports too.
They were starting to put him closer and closer to the end of the list when nobody was there. And that would upset them, you know. They knew he was there, but he'd be there all the time.
So we jumped in the pond, a pond stay out, eternal back of you. Then you swam away, and you said, I love you.
You know, people that didn't know him well, people on the scene, or younger, newer people on the scene that didn't know him, you know, would just write him off as a drunk. And he was a drunk, but he was so much smarter than people gave him credit for. He was a great artist. He was a great performer. You know, being a drunk got in the way of that as far as his appeal to other people that didn't know him.
I stopped keeping in touch the last few years of his life because it was just a little too painful to watch. You know, this really charismatic, really talented, really bright person just start to kind of wither away in front of your eyes.
I did slowly notice his mind went a little more then. I was dating a nurse at the time, and he came over our house, and he looked awful. First things he was saying to me was, do you know if I left my TV on at the house? I'm like, how would I know that, Bobby? I'm here at my house. And no, did I leave it on? I'm like, I don't know, are you okay? You know, have a seat. And I'd get him some water and stuff, and I had my girl come out and look at him, and she was like, hey Bobby, how you doing? You know, I was like, oh, I'm okay. I just gotta get in the garage and do something. No reason to go in the garage. He just would walk into the garage, and I'd follow him into the garage and say, what do you need? Well, I was looking for that thing that does, you know, and just totally incoherent. Next thing I heard, he was in a nursing home of sorts, you know, and was already slowly on his way out, you know, which was really sad because he would call me from there and still say, get a backpack and sneak me in a 4-pack. You know, he was still at that time. And I was like, for a while, I wasn't even taking his calls because I knew he was just going to beg me to bring him, you know, alcohol, you know.
The last time I saw Bobby was at my old bandmate's funeral, with Dan Hosker from Holy Terrors, and I didn't even recognize Bobby. You know, he looked so much older. You know, aged, like, just, he aged himself, you know. Everything just took a toll on him. It was really sad. You know, he could barely talk.
When he was at home, Bobby was in bad shape. Had to have a lot of blood transfusions, a lot of medical work, hospital work, where had to monitor him all the time and shit like that. And Bobby was there at the home, and he didn't want to be at the home, and every once in a while I'd go over there and he'd be like, Tico, hey, what's up? How you doing? And he'd be talking. And then all of a sudden he'd break out in the middle of nowhere. He'd be like, dude, gotta get me the fuck out of here. And whenever I wanted to calm Bobby down in the home, I'd be like, dude, we're gonna practice soon. Even though I knew it was fucking bullshit, but I'd tell him that and I'd sell him down. And he'd be like, yeah, we're gonna practice. We're gonna do a new band. I'm like, yeah, we are. We're gonna do a new fucking band. No load covers, just new stuff. And he'd be like, yeah.
So sadly, he was in the hospital, in hospice, and he never came out of that. And we threw him a 42nd birthday party in 2012. I think it was, and I made up a banner for it and everything, and he was incoherent, kind of lying in bed. But one of the tricks I would use, like we used to get on stage to get him to wake up for a second, was say, wake up Bobby, we're going on in 5 minutes. And he would open his eyes, and it was the one thing, he was still ready to go on stage, you know, even lying in his deathbed.
You hear a lot of stories, you know, that do end well, where people have been through hell. They've jammed in front of hundreds and thousands of people. They've done every damn drug there is. They've been there and done that. And they hook up with a girl in rehab and she changes, you know. I would have liked to see that for Bobby. I would have liked to see, you know, with all the relationships he had, I would have liked to see some girl save his ass, you know, because that's sometimes what we need. That's sometimes what happens, you know. I feel like my wife kind of saved me. Let it be a life lesson, but at the same time, let it be an inspiration. He sleeps all day, bring home these beautiful girls, you know, and he's just living the rock and roll lifestyle while my dad watches him deteriorate, you know. But my dad was always mad and giving Bobby shit. Hi Dad, how's it going? By God, if I were you, I'd kill myself, you lazy hopping and a popping punk rack asshole motherfucker, blah, blah, blah. This was Bobby's life, walking into the house, my dad giving him shit, he couldn't stand it, but he'd make light of it, and he'd make art out of it.
All the crackheads knew Bobby, all the fucking drug dealers. Everybody knew Bobby. Bobby was safe. Even he could be falling around the place. Didn't matter. Nobody touched him. Nobody did anything to him. He was the only white guy that could walk down into the neighborhood at 3 in the morning and nothing happened.
I started Marilyn Manson Spooky in the 90s, and I think I first heard of Road in 91.
What was your first impression of them?
That they were just dirty. They look really just dirty and almost homeless, and it's like I think I wondered for a second, like if they were really like that bad off, and like how could they afford gear, where would they rehearse, but they were just suburban kids like anybody else.
Load had nothing. Okay, even me. Okay, me and Load together. You put all of us together, we had nothing. You know, but what we accomplished with so little, we're proud of that. You know, a lot of people were saying that Load gets all the good local shows and they're hogging all the great shows, you know, like they got the Murphy's Law show, the Ramones, the L7, Subhumans, Fear, Agent Orange, the Warped Tour. You know, some people were complaining about that. But the band wanted those shows, and they deserved those shows, so that's what happened. They got them. And that was my job to do that, so I've got no apologies to any scene fleas.